And so we're thankful. This is
Yes,
good. This is
exactly.
awesome. It could have been a day later because then we would have looked extra awesome. Say, hey, we need another balance patch, and then, pff, hey, do you guys have an insider information, something like that? But no, we will absolutely take this. And today we are going to dig into the biggest winners, the biggest losers. But there is part of the previous episode that I don't want to shy too far away from because I think it's completely relevant and it feeds into what we were going to talk about anyway, and that is the sore thumb that's been kind of sticking out, especially here with the Capcom Pro Tour. We have to talk about her again, guys, because she won a whole nother Capcom Pro Tour. She is 3 for 4, and that is everybody's favorite Killer Bee, Cammy. She's been an issue. Now, she's been attended to, and we're going to talk about that. But before we get into it, I think understanding some of the specifics as to why she's as good as she is are important, because then we can frame up what we would want to see changed, and then we can look at the changes and go, is this going to cause some effectual alteration in how she performs? So I'll kind of go through this fairly quickly because we've been talking about what's good in Street Fighter V, what's good in the meta, and Cammy, man, she checks some boxes. She's fast on her feet. She's got great footsies. She's got decent reach with things like crouching medium kick. So she's scary in the footsies realm. Everyone and their mother knows. Oh, by the way, saying mother, I went and met my mom last week at Denny's for breakfast, and she got there a little bit before me. And when I got to the table, she was watching our podcast. So I wanted to give shout outs to my mom.
Shout out
Everyone
to
and their
John's
mother.
mom. We everyone loves John's mom. She like we always hear stories about her. She's really really awesome. I can't wait to meet her in the
She's
future.
a very nice lady. Yeah. So hey, what's up, mom? If you watch this too. Okay. So
No,
anyways,
no, hold on. Did you when you walked up to her? Did she say something like, "I can't believe that"?
she made a bunch of comments about you being ugly. Yes, if that's what
No,
you're
no,
getting
no,
at.
no, no,
Oh.
no, no. About
Oh,
Cammy,
and she didn't say that.
I was gonna say, a word that I'm not allowed to say about females and stuff like that, but it's about Cammy, so I don't know if that's allowed or not. But regardless, just like some expletive, about females, like I can't believe that Cammy is doing this and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
she
Like,
had just had a sailor mouth of things to say about. We actually had to leave the Denny's and go to a nearby IHOP because of how vulgar she was being about Cammy, because she really feels the pain. Anyways, anyways, what's up, mom? So Cammy, she's got incredibly good up close pressure. She always has, and so when she's up there, she's already very, very scary. Her ability to get up in your face is really good because one, she's amazing at footsies, and she can play the game that we've talked about where you put up a wall for anyone trying to advance, and then if you see people doing that, your counter to it is to put up harder hitting buttons at the appropriate ranges. That's kind of like the scissors to that particular rock. Paper. Yeah. Yes, I know how to play games.
However it works, and of course, if you play a zoner like Manad or something like that, again, you can put up a defensive wall and keep her out pretty decently until she does her Cammy stuff.
Right. So as everything sharpens everything, not only is Cammy amazing on the ground and really quick and has got really good footsie tools and is really scary up in your face, but at any point she can just decide to throw all that out the window and go to the air and have crazy dive kick pressure with weird angles that come down, and she can cut things short. And watching the CPT Infiltration, who did very well, got second place overall, ended up losing to NL in the grand finals, and actually was the only one that gave NL any losses, as I understand it, in the tournament at all. But even Infiltration, playing Ed, who has the easiest anti-airs in the game, perhaps on par with a few other characters because they're single inputs, and he's got two of them, plus he's got an anti-air normal. I think it's back medium punch, don't quote me on it. Infiltration, we all know how strong of a player he is. NL was jumping with regular jumps forward, and plenty of times Infiltration's Ed was not ready to anti-air or chose not to anti-air simply because, hey, I'm not sure whether or not she's going to be cutting it short, if she's coming at this angle, that angle. So she has built-in mix-ups with her air approaches, and like if you're a DP character, you're worried about whiffing a DP and eating an entire crush counter combo. So not only is she great on the ground, but she's also great there, and not only is she great in those both of those places, but having abilities in one causes your attention to be pulled in that direction and opens up the other one better. So Cammy, a really strong character, and in the hands of an expert like NL's not the best player in the world, but he might be on his way to being there with some of the stuff we saw, just controlling from every range and just zipping around, and it made it look like Cammy was even faster than she normally is. She is crazy, especially in the hands of an expert player, and so we're seeing people put her on the top of tier lists in matter-of-fact ways, at least in the top 3. As we've said before, having a character so obviously being the best or one of the absolute best is not a good look for your game here in 2021. Yeah, we are not in 2020 anymore. 2021, where you can so often update. But I will eat those words right now because Capcom did it. And not only did they do it, they gave a lot of explanation as to what they were thinking when they were doing it. And this is exactly what we wanted to see from them. So alterations have been made. And unless you had anything else that you wanted to say about Cammy's abilities beforehand, we can start jumping into her changes.
Yeah, just a couple quick things. 3 of them in top 8, 5 of them total in the results of the tournament. We got a mirror match in the winter semifinals with Gamer B and NL. And then of course before all this stuff happened, like we had run a few Cammy stories and people were just defending her up and down, and then the tournaments happened and everyone just kind of like sat there and went, and it's just
you know what this is? This is me not going too ham, but I'm sprinkling a little bit of I told you so dust onto those that were the naysayers and the whiners about us whining. Oh, one other thing I wanted to point out is that Cammy can convert into meaningful damage and Oki, basically into her spiral arrow, from light confirms, medium confirms, and heavy confirms. Not every character can do that kind of a thing. So if she catches you with jabs, it's going into a knockdown, which gives her Oki, and she's arguably her strongest, right up in your face. If she hits you with mediums, like most characters, she can convert, and then of course if she hits you with heavy, she can convert. But the fact that she can get that spiral arrow from so many different starters, that's a big deal too, because she's able to go into her her best mode very quickly from a bunch of different angles. So I wanted to throw that out there too.
We were running some Cammy mirrors and stuff before the patch happened, and it's just like her post super mix up. Like she gets her super really easy. She built a lot of meter, and then her super is really super easy to combo into from anything. And then right after her super, she gets a great Okazemi mix up on you. It just double dashes forward, and it's like why does she need that? It's one of the things I want Capcom to take care of. It's one of the things I was going to talk about, but they didn't address it. But hey, you know what? We know that these patches like. Maybe it's changed a little bit where they're more reactive from Capcom, but like even then to get approved, for the PlayStation Network and Steam and all that other kind of stuff, you've got to submit stuff somewhat like a little bit early to have it tested and all that kind of thing. So we know that this patch has probably been in the works for a little while. I don't know, maybe a month, maybe a couple weeks. I don't know, something like that. It's for modern times that would actually be pretty fast because usually these patches were months in advance. That's how they had to be. I think that, they with all the games doing updates now, I think they go a little faster. But still, this was not a reaction to the most recent tournament there we were just talking about where NL won it because that just happened this last week, and this had clearly been planned for a little while.
And yeah, I did have a few things. Now, it wasn't so easy, so obvious as to say what you should change about Cammy to regulate her without completely changing her identity or nerfing her into the ground, right? And I've always been I've always hated her ability to have basically built-in mix-ups from the air that are just so much benefit, and sometimes from doing like nothing. But it's like, do you attend to that? Do you lessen her damage? I think the lessening damage is like, it's something, but I don't think that it's going to echo very far into the bigger picture, and it's not going to change the way she plays at all. It would be more of something like she just has to hit you one more time, which again, that's something, but that's not really getting at what I would like to see. One of the core changes that I was like, matter of fact, this should have been attended to a long time ago, is what you were saying. She should not have Oki off of her 3-frame super that hits from like anywhere and can be comboed from like anything and is 3 frames. Like, come on, why does she have that? They've attended to that in later seasons where they kind of stopped giving characters follow-ups after a super lands. But Cammy still has it, and even after this patch, she still has it. So not a fan there, but
all right, well, let's hit what changed now.
Yeah.
Now we've set the stage here quite well on the problems, and this is a minor balance patch. I want to get out of the way. Like, I never expected this to be a huge overhaul of the character. If they're going to do that, which I don't think they're going to, but it would happen, you know, at a brand new start of the season. This is a minor balance patch, probably the equivalent of a 0.5, which we probably need to get away from using because Capcom doesn't use that terminology, and now we might be at the stage of time where we're seeing multiple 0.5 updates or half-step patches or whatever you want to call them along the way. But the first thing that Cammy lost was her EX spiral arrow now is not frame 1 projectile invincibility. It no longer has that. And actually, I tested this out quite a bit, and we'll be putting footage up here of showing a casing it against Rose. But Cammy could basically stand at almost any range whatsoever, and on reaction, it just EX spiral arrow through any kind of projectile whatsoever. And that's still possible to some degree. You can do it around reaction, but your window to do so is much tighter, because previously this move had 6 frames of invincibility, and now it has 2 frames of invincibility for fireballs. And so I was like, okay, yeah, you can do it, but a slower moving projectile or one that's already in your face, you're not getting through. As you can see, Rose is pelting Cammy in the face right now with some of this stuff, right? And it's actually a very significant change, because now these matchups where Cammy was 7-3 on him because it was like, oh, you have a fireball? I don't care. You know, kind of thing. That's pretty much what Cammy was at before. If I have meter, I don't care. Maybe even if I have meter, I don't care. It's Cammy's kind of the biggest. It's but now you can dial back a lot of those matchups from a 7-3 to a 6-4. If we're talking about the best character in the game or one of them, dialing back a handful of matchups from a hardcore advantage to a minor one is a gigantic deal. And right now, I'm thinking that Cammy's still a top 10 character. It's really hard. Like, I can't see that not ever kind of being the case here in Street Fighter V. She's always going to be really good, but you know, there was a case that she was number 1. I don't think that she's a number 1 character anymore based on this alone, because you've got characters like Guile, Rose, Manat, Poison, or Poison doesn't have projectiles, but you know, Dhalsim and other stuff. Those characters who have projectiles, Cammy has to respect them a good bit more now. Doesn't mean she has to respect them entirely, but like, her just complete free ways of getting around this like are no longer existent. Like, she actually has to use her brain and use some skill to get around fireballs now.
It's no longer, oh, was that a fireball? Oh, you know, do I have meter? I do have meter. Okay, let's get in and get some Oki started. Wait, yeah, let's do it. Bam, and then hits you with it. You know, like, she's got to be really looking for that. And that's one of the things too. The more that you force a character to be precise, the less space they're going to have, well, the more focus they're going to have on doing that one thing, and therefore not as ready to be doing all of the other things as well. So I think of Sagat especially as sees this change and goes, what a godsend, you know? Yep. But even man. Like the fact that you have a character like Guile, and we all know how powerful Guile has been as a zoner and as a rushdown character, but we won't go there. And you think like, well, Cammy has just this matter-of-fact way through one of Guile's strongest, most fundamental tools in his Sonic Boom. It's like, that's scary, you know? And so, and I like that she can have a move that goes through fireballs, absolutely. But maybe she has to use it with a little more precision, a little more spacing, and a little more tact. And I will say that when we were running Cammy sets just before the patch hit yesterday, I was playing against Dream King's Gil, and I was having a hard time getting through, I think it was the ice balls, which are a little bit slower, and they're pretty big too. Like, I was getting caught by almost all of those, and it would end up being like a trade. But so now, if like that's not happening almost at all, she's got to really be precise with it. And it's just like
what Dream King's Gil is doing there is he's throwing the slow version of the ice ball to catch where the projectile invincibility would run out before, and it's really smart, because again, if you play Gil, one, you're not playing a high tier character, and two, if you're any good with that character, you've put in some serious time with them to get very good. And so that's a very specific setup to catch Cammy players. But it's even better now. And so this was pretty good before, but now it's maybe just, it's okay. Like, I think it's a viable option for it to help Cammy deal with fireball throwers, but it's not a great one. So it's
not going to make or break her, but it's something.
Yeah.
All right.
And One of her other major changes was her EX dive kick now has 4 frames of more recovery on whiff for a total of 17 frames, which is definitely punishable on reaction.
Yes.
It's getting around the 13 frame mark. Like, I mean, that's with Cammy's animation where she comes down and stuff like that, it's still possible to do it. But that extra 4 frames, especially when we're talking about like medium and heavy buttons, which you kind of need that stuff for the ranges that Cammy's doing it at to kind of connect with anything worthwhile.
Yeah, you're not going to be right next to her, right?
If you're right next to her, she probably hit you with a dive kick, right? So it's those 4 extra frames we've seen are a big deal, because I think like with Urian's handshake, that the stand heavy punch and stuff like that, they added stuff like 5 extra frames. That's a big deal we've seen, and it just discourages people from spamming it out mindlessly, right? Mm-hmm. And this is on, and so I said EX dive kick. This is actually on all the metered versions of Cammy's dive kick. I had to do a triple take on here and see if I was looking at this wrong, because I could not believe it. Because Capcom actually nerfed Cammy's V-trigger dive kicks. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what? Did they lose their minds? And I mean, in a good way? Like, did you find your mind, I guess, right? Not lose it. You found your mind finally. Thank you. And it's like, those things are so stupid. When we were playing Cammy and it was just like, oh, I got V-trigger. Well, let me just throw these out here and hope something good happens. And I mean, it was just, and it's like, okay, well, now if you whiff with it, at least you have 4 more frames of recovery to actually do something against it. And it looks like her dive kicks are pretty consistent now, where they're all 17 frames of recovery on whiff. So it's not like a Kuma where he whiffs a normal version or an EX and it's like night and day difference on the frame data, right? Cammy's is universal. Her dive kick, if you whiff with it, it's like 17 frames of recovery. You can get that timing, spacing, and everything down, where Cammy has to be more precise. And this is actually a change that you specifically requested many years ago, and people can go back and check the tapes. You're like, I want Cammy's dive kick stuff to be more precise. And we weren't sure exactly about how to get there. Shout outs to Capcom. They really do a good job with some of this stuff. And they're like, hey, the precision is don't freaking whiff. And if you whiff with it, you're going to get blown up now. And I'm like, that's pretty awesome.
So some of her dive kicks are 4 more frames of recovery, right? But then I think the V-trigger one is actually 8 more frames of recovery. Is that right?
I'd have to double check that.
And the one that comes out of the hooligan combo, because that's crazy too, because when she does that, especially full screen, it's really fast. And at any time she can go for the dive kick. And if you're like, I'm going to anti-air, that's when you're ended up whiffing. And then she gets a crush counter for your trebles. But she can also, if you just freeze, she can command grab you out of the air where she does like the head scissors takeover sort of a thing, or she can sweep. So it's like it's like a jack of all trades, Swiss Army knife kind of a move. And so at least now, if she does the stop short, she's going to have 8 more frames of recovery, if I've read that right.
Perfect. You got it perfect.
Yeah. And the other one, I think the most important thing about all of this, it's good that Cammy players are going to have to be more precise with what they do, but at higher levels, this is not going to be as much of a thing, because higher level players are not going to whiff their dive kicks as much. Now, you do have incentive as an opponent to Cammy to kind of maybe space yourself in certain ways where you can cause dive kicks to whiff more often. And maybe that's a more viable strategy now, which is nice. That it kind of opens up the playing field for us. But the biggest thing about this, as far as I can tell on paper, is that if she's going for one of those just YOLO, I'm going to dive kick in and get my pressure started on you for almost free, if you V-shift the dive kick, that has 8 more frames of recovery. And that V-trigger dive kick, it used to be such that I don't think you could do much in the way of actually punishing with V-shift, especially in a lot of, depending on the spacing and such. Now, you're going to be able to punish that move if you V-shift it. That's huge. That means that you can play a game where Cammy's, you have an answer more than you ever have before to Cammy just going up to the air and just doing it. Save a little V-shift, be ready for it, and she comes in with it, you V-shift, and you punish the crap out of her. And like, what's going to feel better? What's going to feel more therapeutic, cathartic to be able to punish a Cammy V-trigger dive kick, man? Like, thank you. That, as far as I can tell, is I think the biggest change here.
Yeah, and also like one of the things Notorious was an option select that Cammy players would do, where they would do the V trigger dive kick, and if you went to go air to air to knock it out, which was one of the better ways of defending against it, they would land before you and they would recover so fast they would have time to anti-air you because, she comes down so quickly. But now with extra 8 frames, she might be able to get an anti-air in there, but she might not. And I had so many Cammy players option select me on that, where it's like, okay, you tried to go air to air on this, that's a bad idea, and it's just like you just would have to sit there and hold it so much before. And now it's like, again, we just got done running sets, and it's like all of us are experienced players, we're all good, and it's like, okay, Cammy's got a V trigger, just sit there and hold it, like hold this mix up, and it's ridiculous. Like, you should have some options for defending it, and it looks like we got them now,
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to be night and day difference, but like for some players, I guess it might feel that way, especially if you've been holding Cammy mix-ups for the last 5 years or so.
Everybody and their mother, this is for you too, Mom. Go into training mode and test out what your character can do if they V-shift a Cammy V-trigger 1 dive kick, and the other dive kicks as well. But that is going to probably be one of your best friends in that matchup. And not only is that good in and of itself, but if she loses that option to a certain amount, like what else she has to, it less refines. It makes other options less effective. And so I think this is a good start. I don't know how much this is going to resonate, but I'm excited to see it. I think there is obvious intention here to attend to this character, and hopefully she only wins like half of the remaining CPT events so that we can have a couple of different characters in there. One other change is that her EX spiral arrow is now throwable on its startup, which seems a little bit odd because you're like, how often is that kind of a thing happening? I think what that is in tandem with the V-shift change that they noted, more generally speaking, right? It's just...
Yeah, can we actually hold that for Zangief? Because
let's hold that for Zangief.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think that we got to hold Zangief because, man,